start. Thank you very much for the invitation. And the topic of my talk is detect operational anomalies in serverless application with email-based Amazon DevOps Guru service. But before I start the talk, I would like to chat shortly if this service hasn't been deprecated by AWS since today. Okay, it's a joke. I checked. It's not. Otherwise, the talk will not make any sense. So let's continue and hope that the service, and I mean really great service, will stay forever, or even with further development. So my name is Vadym, Ukrainian native, but live in Germany since more than 20 years. Two different passions, serverless and Java. Sometimes it's bridges, but this talk is less about Java. Not about Java, but serverless or DevOps Guru anomaly detection service for serverless applications. So you can get in touch with me via different channels, and I'm AWS community builder since basically the beginning of that program. So we will be talking about in this whole DevOps life cycle about the two last steps, I would say, operate and monitor. This is where this service resides. But before we start, just to paint a picture to what category this service belongs, and it's AI Ops. Today is everything Ops, DevOps, ML Ops, AI Ops. This is AI Ops, and it stands for artificial intelligence for IT operations, and the goal is to reduce the human intervention in the IT operational process, so that we can learn advanced machine learning techniques without being expert there, just to increase service quality and reduce operational incidents. And DevOps Guru is basically managed service, managed AI platform, the AI Ops platform, powered by machine learning, but you don't need to be expert in that, and I am also neither the expert there. So what this service promises in general, it's also available for other, not only for serverless services, but also containers, standard EC2s, also Kubernetes containers and all that stuff, but generally they can detect automatically increased latency, error rates, all possible stuff like timeout, throttle, CPU, memory, disk utilization, but also resource constraints, because each AWS account has some limits that you can reach. Of course, there are some of them soft, you can increase them, but sometimes you're even not aware and you're just pushing the boundaries. So what are the benefits? So first of all, we will see the automatically detect operational issues. It easily scales and maintains. We will see you can activate it on your AWS organizations, and also reduce noise and alarm fatigue. So it decides when to create an insight and when it's kind of short time error. So basically, there is not too much magic behind that, because DevOps Guru basically counts on your services that you are anyway using, like CloudWatch, and in case you actively activate them, AWS Config, AWS CloudTrail, and AWS X-Ray. They monitor all that stuff together. They build metrics, also what is the baseline of your application, of your working application, and they just figure out if there are some deviations, depending on how your application behaves, but also they have a huge knowledge of the services behind that they, in case of serverless, even operate on behalf of you, so they can figure out kind of quickly if something can become kind of out of control and you are just navigating toward outage. And there are, of course, integrations to professional incident management tools like OpsGenie, Atlassian OpsGenie, or PagerDuty. AWS has its own in the systems manager. You can push it via SNS. So not too much information how it's really implemented, but basically what I found, these are domain-specific detectors, just that work individually, but also in ensembles together, just trained to identify all possible misconditions, misbehaviors, like mentioned error rates, latency, incoming requests, and all that stuff. But of course, what is important is, of course, the seasonality. Yeah, we are working, my company, we are offering software for design and purchasing of the photo products. This is highly seasonal stuff. So we have our huge peaks in the Christmas, where the people order something like photo book of the year. But basically, we have many European customers. The purchases are after the working hours or on Sunday. So during the night or in the morning, it's just much less. And of course, it will be not very fortunate if that service will detect normal increase in traffic as an outage or DDoS attack as that. Yeah, so that there is some intelligence automatically just to see, okay, this is a natural traffic increase and not something that is outage. So that's the reason behind that. This was the quote of Werner Vogel's given at reInvent 3-4 years, maybe 5 years ago. All the code we will ever write will be business logic. We are maybe years behind that, and with GenAI we have other discussions currently, but nevertheless, if we will be looking, especially in the serverless world, the kind of standard serverless application, this is the snapshot of our application. Half year ago, there's one application, it's important application, but you see we have number of alarms that we created manually at that time, 38. Now there are more than 50. So we define them manually sometimes, yeah? And this is huge work, yeah? There are lots of Lambda functions, API gateway, DynamoDB. We need to define this 500s, 400s API gateway errors, and when we need alarm and we don't need alarm. It's really huge work besides the business logic, of course. And this is something that DevOps Guru aims at improving. But of course, it's about operations and it involves trust. So you can simply say, just delegate this very sensitive and important stuff to some AWS service without having tested that it just produces the results that I want, so that the anomalies will be recognized. And this is what we'll be doing and testing and seeing what the service can do and maybe even can't do. So I prepared I cannot show you our live incidents. So that's why I just will do some work that probably you need to do before you decide would you like to use it or not. So basically there are two approaches. You can activate DevOps Guru in parallel to your existing alarms and just see how it works. Will it be recognized or not? It of course involves double costs. DevOps Guru will charge you and you will have your normal alarms. And if your application is quite stable, you will need years of work just to figure out. You need incidents just to see that DevOps Guru recognize them. Sometimes you don't have them, so it takes too much time. Or you try to simulate incidents for your application in advance, just simply to see, okay, will it react or not? But of course, simulating incident at scale can cost money. We will be seeing how we approach that just to see will we get the results. But this is basic application. We have something similar at work. API gateway, bunch of Lambda functions, just to create and delete and get the products all by ID, and it's stored in DynamoDB. This is serverless stack, and we have only experience with DevOps Guru with the serverless stack. So this application will be basically, we will create artificial incidents and see what's happening. So, but DevOps Guru is normal service, so how to set it up? You go to the console, select DevOps Guru, then you can basically select what services will be monitored. You have several options. So the first one is just everything will be monitored what DevOps Guru supports. That can be quite expensive. Or you can select CloudFormation stacks. CloudFormation stack is basically application. If you deploy one application, it will be CloudFormation stack on CloudFormation. Yeah, this is this DevOps Guru product API. I have only one, or you see here there are more, but I only monitor that. If the whole stack is expensive for your use case, you can use tagging. So you simply can tag all the resources that support tag with DevOps Guru monitored true, and then select this tag and say, please monitor only those services. It's up to you. For AWS organizations, you can kind of pre-configure that. If you say, we have so many new accounts coming and going, I would like automatically that DevOps Guru monitors them, you can decide. Yeah, you can group them. For example, you say, I don't want to monitor QA accounts, but I would like to monitor live accounts. That's possible. If you just say, okay, that's way to go, then it's fine. This is DevOps Guru dashboard stuff. Kind of, you see how it's going. We have here one reactive incident, normal incident currently happening. This is kind of the screenshot. Proactive insights, we'll be talking about that. You see here how many resources are monitored, how much time did it take in the last month just to more or less MTTR, how much time did it take to resolve the incident, and all the stuff is kind of available. If you go to the resources analyzed, you can see what resources are being analyzed, so that the rules are applied how you would like. So these are all the resources behind product API in my case. So, and this is kind of this snapshot of the console. You see here reactive and proactive on site. We'll be talking in lots of insights that have been generated. They are all closed, but we will be looking to that. So you see the whole history of them, and you can just click. I think for 6 months it will be stored, so you can review it even later. But let's generate some, and what we will be doing. So once again, if you applying that to the real traffic in this test phase, kind of working might be expensive. What we will be doing, we will provoke this incident by kind of shrinking the resources. So you can kind of on DynamoDB Lambda, you can define kind of the constraints, how many reads and writes are allowed. So you can set low values of how many concurrent Lambda invocations, just to simply kind of cheaply see what happens. Yeah, and your real traffic might be much bigger, but once again, it will be the same logic, and it's simply impossible to possible just to test it with low budget. I used stress tool Hey for this. You can use something else. It just doesn't matter. Hey works similarly to curl, and it's very easy just to create some stress to the system. And we will see if DevOps Guru recognizes the incident. We will simply stop the stress test tool so that application becomes healthy. We will be looking just if DevOps Guru could recognize that and close the insight. So let's start with DynamoDB. Normally, you'll probably be doing something like on-demand scaling, so on-demand capacity. So then it's very difficult to throttle, but it can become expensive. You can set the max values also for that. Just to see how it works, or there are also limits with DynamoDB, how quickly it can scale. So you can double the limits only each 30 minutes. So if you have spike of traffic with DynamoDB, you can also be throttled. For the ease of experiment, I used provisioned mode and simply say I would like just read capacity is only 1. It's very easy to throttle such DynamoDB table, and that's what I will be doing with Hey. 20 containers, 20 requests per second per container, and with Z 15 minutes, I just more or less stress testing this API, which basically points to get product by ID 1 Lambda function going from API gateway to the DynamoDB. So the goal was just to see how quickly and whether this incident will be recognized. For DynamoDB, you need also to know that there is the burst capacity. So it takes 5 minutes to first that the burst capacity is away, so just used, and only then you will see throttling on DynamoDB anyway. Yeah, so this is nothing that happens directly, and what we will be seeing here, such an incident was recognized, DynamoDB throttle request anomalous application. You see high severity, you see here some data. So this kind of incident was recognized after, I would say, 7 minutes, and I will explain why later. What you can also do, you can dive into the metrics. You see here different things like aggregated metrics, relevant event list, graphed anomalies, so we'll be looking to this. With aggregated metrics, you can see all the metrics that DevOps Guru recognized, like they are kind of in abnormal state. Of course, it was stress test, so you see a lot of count metrics. They recognize too many requests here, kind of API gateway and all that stuff. You see when it starts, but if you look, you can also group them. Here with grouping by service, then you can see it more clearly. And if you look into this, you will see the only errors, real errors, because number of requests is not real, it's only indication. You see the real error only happens with read throttle events on DynamoDB. You see the table and all that stuff. So you basically can come to the conclusion that DynamoDB was the source of the problem. And you can see now that it started with API gateway receiving more requests, and basically your DynamoDB could not sustain the load. Yeah, your real example can be 100 read capacity units, it just doesn't matter. So you can also see the metrics, not only the flat lines, but also kind of how many requests have been throttled. So you see here for all the metrics that you saw previously, you can see exact numbers as well. So that helps just to see, to basically understand the impact of the event. And you see also here the timeline, when it started, when it ended. So if you receive the call, you can analyze quickly. What you can also do, and this is important, you have log group names. If you have Lambda function that have log groups, you can quickly jump into the CloudWatch logs where the errors occurred. So you can jump and then see, maybe it might help you just what exactly happened. If you don't know, it's just not that you need to search for the error, for this error logs, but you can jump into that. And this relevant event is important. The preconditions to see that is that you activate CloudTrail. Probably you should have CloudTrail activated to log all the events just to see. But in case the incident wasn't kind of created naturally, but for example, via the infrastructure as a code change or the deployment, you might have additional information. So for example, I changed read capacity units for DynamoDB in the console. You can do it in infrastructure as code from 1.5 to 1. And it was infrastructural change. And you can click here and you will see, we'll jump into the corresponding CloudTrail event. You see update table on DynamoDB, so you can review, maybe somebody changed something. And if you click there, you can see exact JSON for this. But you need experience. It's first of all not very helpful. You see that end result, what was kind of changed on the DynamoDB side, but you don't really know the state, what was previous. For this, to see that, you need to activate AWS config, which comes with a price tag, but AWS config gives you the infrastructural changes all the time. If you activated AWS config, you can click there additionally, and then you will see from and to. So you can see somebody changed read capacity units on the DynamoDB from 5 to 1. And that, in your case, it may be from 200 to 30, but this was not enough kind of for DynamoDB. Yeah, so for that, you can recognize if it was caused by misconfiguration on the infrastructural level and not the natural, that you simply not designed well, or your values were low from the beginning, but now you have more traffic. You can find this as well. Really useful. There is also some information that you can read how to fix those incidents. I basically don't find it very useful because I'm sometimes on call duty and something then happens, then you don't have time to read documentation. You need to be experienced to fix it, and the next day you can review it and maybe show your junior developers what was the problem. But in case you have stress and the customer is calling, the boss is calling, then you probably, the people in at least in their call duty should be quite experienced. Okay, I will show you some more incidents in that Stack API gateway. Many things can go wrong. For example, you can reach the limits of API gateway. The default one, for example, is you can increase it to 10,000 requests per second for all API gateways in your account. And there is this rate, burst that you can change, but you can set the very low quota per day, just to see what happens if you throttle API gateway very cheaply. Simply set here quota which is low and create the stress test. This should correspond to HTTP 429 too many requests and throttle out of the API gateway. This is one thing. What else can go wrong with the API gateway? You're asking for the product which doesn't exist. Then you will receive 404, basically. That's normal stuff, not found. For both of them, the same. DevOps Guru could recognize that and put basically the same 400XX error message on the graph, and everything else you can find the same. So this incident was also recognized. You see here, you don't see the exact error HTTP error code. It's always 4XX, and the same is for 5XX. The problem is not DevOps Guru, but CloudWatch. They only store this in this cardinality, because otherwise the cost of observability will explode if they will plot it to each possible code. So DevOps Guru cannot do the magic if CloudWatch doesn't provide you the values, but it was possible to recognize that incident as well. We will be also seeing 500 errors shortly. If we will look now what can go wrong with Lambda function. So you can run out of concurrency. That's on the account level or in the function level. And how you can test it, set very low concurrency limit for Lambda function. It's the cheapest way to test it. Set it to 1. Yeah, the default one will be your account limit, like 1,000, something like this. Set it to something cheap and just create the stress test. The easiest way you will see will be also recognized after several minutes. You see throttle SIM on the Lambda function. You see the name of Lambda function. In case Lambda got an error, it propagates by default. You can implement something else, but it propagates by default to 500 on API gateway. So you see here several metrics, error in Lambda function, which is propagated to 500 on the API gateway. Works very well. So I will jump over several stuff. What I would like just to show you the same also, if you run out of, you can set that Lambda function timeouts after 30 seconds. This also will be recognized very, very easily. So all that stuff, I even tested if I give low memory to Lambda function. As a Java programmer, Java developer, at least Java 11 couldn't start with Lambda having only 128 megabytes of memory. It just even doesn't start. So it was recognized. It might happen also with other programming languages. You add too many dependencies, new dependencies, and don't increase memory. And sometimes it's just not enough. So you need sometimes to adjust depending on how it involves. So this all works. I show you several more incidents. Here, for example, we have Lambda and we have SQS queue. So we have some asynchronity here, and we have Lambda polling from the SQS queue. So what might happen, you can change format of the event of the message, which goes to SQS queue, and then Lambda cannot parse it. It just takes it from SQS queue and runs into the error. That happens also to us. And with that, this will be tried asynchronously according to your policy. By default, it takes days, as far as I know, and then the message will be deleted from the queue and go to the queue in case you have set it. Yeah, but you need to recognize in case Lambda is not able to process that. And this was also my test to see. Just I add Lambda function which polled always run into the error kind of condition, not very difficult to throw an exception. So what you will see in that case, if the message cannot be processed from SQS queue, you will have here messages in flight with some number. So the message arrived in queue and it's in flight but can't be processed. So some service tries to process it but cannot. So the question was, can DevOps Guru recognize it? And they did. And they also produced here several errors. You see error sum in Lambda. So the Lambda went into the error. And you see here very difficult to pronounce errors from the SQS queue, approximate number of messages visible. This is the CloudWatch metrics, which says to you, you have the message in the SQS queue, which is not processed for a long time. Basically, very difficult name, but you see here, if you see that picture, you see the combination, it's Lambda polling from SQS queue and can process that. Yeah, so this was also recognized very quickly. So very cool stuff. The same, we tested it on the kind of Kinesis streams, the same stuff, Lambda pulled records from Kinesis and run into the error. The same was recognized, Lambda error, Kinesis get record some error. So the same similar situations, there are so many asynchronous services. So you see here the whole picture directly what might be wrong. The same is also with step functions. So you can invoke Lambda function which runs into the error, and then you can set retry policies for your state machine, and then after number of retries it will be the fail state. The same you see here, error sum on the Lambda function, execution aborted, execution failed on the state machine. So this combination worked really, really well for everything that we tested. It also works with databases, with the relational ones, but also with Aurora Serverless. I won't go too much into detail. You can look into this for Aurora or RDS databases. You will need performance insights being activated. It helps. This is the service of AWS, which can detect how the SQL statements that took a long time or consumed more CPU. It's even free for 7 days, so there is basically no reason not to activate it. With that combination together, it works really well. So previously, DevOps Guru for RDS was separate service that they needed to set up, but now they are married to normal DevOps Guru. So that's basically, if you have that, and you decide that it needs to be monitored in the stack or by tag, it happens automatically. Yeah, so I just leave it to you just to figure out. There are things that not ideally working, especially if you're using data API with the AWS Aurora Serverless. Postgres, that's another topic. I discovered some issues that I communicated to DevOps Guru team, but it's a rare situation that somebody uses data API. So basically what we saw that nearly all incidents, I will be pointing to several that have not been recognized. This is reactive insights. A DevOps Guru also gives you proactive insights. This is then some kind of configuration, static configuration of your stack is having some issues. It's up to you to fix them, but they are pointing out. So, for example, if you have provision DynamoDB with read and write capacity units, but you over-provision there, they can detect it after several days, gives you the graph and say you are over-provisioning it, so you're overpaying in case you don't use on-demand capacity. So it can save you also money for this. Another stuff is, for example, using DynamoDB, you might forget this checkbox, point-in-time recovery. Then you cannot, if you have an outage, somebody deleted the data on DynamoDB, you can go back. And it's just normal that you activate this and store this. So DevOps Guru could recognize that and say, enable point-in-time recovery. I will jump over this. And they all recognize all that situation if you miss that letter queue or fail a destination. Yeah, so in this case, you can lose messages that will be simply deleted after the visibility timeout and number of retries. So they are telling you your queue doesn't have DL queue, or your DynamoDB Kinesis stream doesn't have failure destination. Failure destination is basically DL queue. It's the same name and the same logic. So yeah, this one was quite interesting. I used relational database, serverless relational database in Frankfurt region. There are 3 availability zones, but then I only used 2 subnets because a relational database requires VPC, and you need to put then the stuff in all availability zones. And I only put the 2 from 3, and they recognize and say, okay, it's maybe not resilient enough. Do it for 3 regions. So this is kind of static configuration that you can recognize. So DevOps Guru, we saw that reactive and proactive inside. DevOps Guru is the tool to recognize the incidents. What they won't do, they won't call you. There will be no phone call from that tool. So you need professional integrations with Ops Center or PagerDuty or Atlassian Ops Genie. I will jump over it, but you can look, we use PagerDuty. We will probably switch to another one, but currently you have DevOps Guru PagerDuty integration as a service, and very easy to set up. Basically, it's SNS setup. You just copy this. If you use PagerDuty, you can select DevOps Guru integration. You will be given this URL. Simply copy this, and with DevOps Guru configuration, you can say, please send it over SNS via HTTPS endpoint to exactly that URL given you by DevOps Guru, so that everything will be kind of put there. And then you can set up basically what teams have on-call duty and all that stuff that PagerDuty gives you. So there is also price tag figure out. It's not cheap. Yeah, it's not even serverless. So DevOps Guru charges you for resources monitored per hour. So each Lambda function, each S3 bucket per hour, and that's why the tool may be not very suitable for staging and test environment, because they will charge exactly the same amount, even if you don't use it and there are no invocations. Yeah, so it's basically either very short term on staging, but it's basically for live environments. So conclusions, observations, mostly incidents have been recognized. It takes 7 minutes just to avoid false positive. 7 minutes starting from the incident, you can decide it's okay or not. I have reaction time of hours in the on-call duty, so 7 minutes is not a problem. It might be different for use case. For short time incidents, no insights have been created, so that's okay. Nobody needs to be woken up in the night because 2 failures on the Lambda function, something like this. That's okay. Yeah, duration anomalies. I have just situation there. We have increased latency. It takes much time to recognize that increased latency is not an error, and it's very difficult for DevOps Guru to figure out is that an problem or not. So that's why it took too much time. I artificially increased the latency, kind of sleep time, added sleep time to Lambda function. It takes time, and you need a big spike in latency that they recognize that. So once again, there are some limitations of CloudWatch, no precise HTTP response code. DevOps Guru also kind of suffers from that. and also no differentiation between Lambda timeout and init error in Lambda function because of the same problem. That's the same error in the CloudWatch. So I have my personal wish list. AWS supports, DevOps Guru supports many services, but especially in the serverless category, there are some missing, like support of event bridge is not there. SQS is there, SNS is there, Kinesis is there, DynamoDB Streams is there, event bridge is not there. And of course, also then event bridge pipes. So all that sub services of event bridge are not there. Also no support for AppSync. There are also some limits that can be reached with that service that basically manage GraphQL. Also, once again, support for Aurora serverless over data API is currently not working well. And I personally wish more better integration with observability tools like X-Ray, but maybe also third parties like Lumigo and Datadog, because X-Ray, sometimes you don't use X-Ray, use something third party. But generally, yeah, that will be my recommendations. And basically that's it. So maybe some closing thoughts, especially in the serverless space. AWS has huge experience operating those services like DynamoDB, Lambda API Gateway across the globe, across all availability, across all regions and availability zones. So for them, it's their daily job to detect if something is not operating well. So this service is kind of, especially for the serverless environment, I personally see a huge promise giving kind of value that you don't need to defy all those alarms, and AWS helps you. But once again, please look into the pricing tag. Yeah, maybe you only monitor certain stuff with that using tags and so on. For example, we excluded S3 buckets from that because we didn't see any incidents in paying for this. It's also for us expensive, but critical stuff we monitor, and it's we see a lot of value. So I hope you could take something with you, just try things out. And it was not Gen AI talk, which is good. And yeah, I'm happy to take your questions. Thank you.
This mic's on. Yep. Thanks for the overview. When you were talking about the proactive features, it reminded me a lot of Security Hub because it tells you that this is a misconfiguration. Do you think it offers something that Security Hub doesn't in that feature?
Yeah, for example, over provisioning of DynamoDB, it's not the security stuff. The same was also that we used provision concurrency for certain situations, but we under-provisioned that. So we could save money by provisioning more in that time. They also give that advice and so on. Funny stuff, we forgot to delete provision concurrency after, because we didn't need that anymore, and DevOps Guru did not tell us that we are now over-provisioned. So there are some missing stuff, but basically it's a mixture. Yeah, so there is, of course, then point-in-time recovery, subnet stuff is security-related, but there are also other stuff. I also saw something they say for Kinesis, we did not activate enhanced metrics. There are normal metrics that are for free. There are enhanced metrics that you need to pay additionally. The same as with S3, for example. They also pointed that out. Of course, it's on us to decide to do it or not. They're not forcing you, but they're telling you are maybe missing something. Look into that. Yeah? You can fix it or you can leave it.
Thank you.
I hope I could answer the question.
Do we have any more questions?
Thanks a lot for that. So my question is, can we send Slack and Microsoft Teams notification as well, in addition to PagerDuty?
There is no direct integration, but with SNS integration, if you can push somewhere, yeah, and it can be HTTP. If this is somewhere is your Teams API gateway, then you can do that, yeah. So, but by default, I only saw DevOps Guru Ops Genie in this Ops Center tool from AWS.
Okay, thank you.
Any more questions? Just scanning the room. No, I think that's it. So thank you, Vadim.
Yeah,
Excellent talk.
thanks for him.
Join me in a round of applause, everybody. Thank you.